After shooting with the C100 Mark II for over 2 years, I thought that moving to the C300 Mark II would be a clear upgrade. But after about 3 months with both cameras, I have been surprised, pleased, disappointed, and ultimately at a loss for which is the better camera for my personal needs. Now perhaps your needs are different than mine, and this video will help you solidify which camera is best for you. Please do feel free to skip around to the various chapters of this comparison to get the info that is most helpful for you. This won't be a full-on review of each camera, but merely addressing the features that I find to be problems with one or both cameras and how they may or may not be compensated in the other. So let's dig into how these cameras really compare. First off, we'll talk about the autofocus. Now the autofocus of both of these cameras is crap. Neither one is reliable and both rather limited in their abilities. And this was the biggest frustration for me with the C100 and why I originally went hunting for an upgrade. The C100 has center frame autofocus only, except for a couple of exceptions with lenses that I have never used and would never want to use. Center frame is generally where I want autofocus to be, well, focusing on, but occasionally I do want to focus on a person and push them to the edge of the frame, and this has resulted in many a ruined shot for me. But surprisingly enough, the C300 is even worse. It will not find or lock in well on things. Even with face detection and face priority in a well-lit environment, I have generally found it to be utterly useless. It constantly hunts back and forth for its focus even after it has locked in on something. This is deplorable and I can never use it on a client shoot, whereas I can use the C100's autofocus more times than not. Let's move on to something cheery, shall we? File sizes. The C100 Mark II has incredibly small file sizes for the amount of information you get out of it. Shooting 1 minute at 30 frames per second in the C-Log Profile MP4 file format at 24 megabits per second yielded a file that was 151 megabytes. For the C300 Mark II, I went ahead and shot everything in 10-bit color C-Log 2 with the C-Gamut color profile to get me the best color possible, knowing I would be sacrificing some file size, but still wanting to maximize the strengths of this camera's upgrade. I mean, why upgrade to the camera if you're not going to play to its color strengths? So, a 1 minute clip at 30 frames per second in 1080 HD, 50 megabits per second long op gave me a file that was 330 megabytes. Shooting in 160 megabits per second intra-frame, still in 1080 HD, yielded a file that was 1.14 gigabytes. And going all the way to the top quality, 4K at 410 megabits per second produced a 3 gigabyte file. So you can see that when it comes to file sizes, the C100 Mark II is a clear winner. Not only that, but you get a pretty great image for as small as these files are. That said, if you do end up going with the C300 Mark II, you can shoot at double the 100's megabits per second, but gain 10-bit color instead of the 8-bit that the C100 gets. You won't be sacrificing huge amounts of storage space, but you will be gaining tons more colors to work with. A side note on long op versus intra-frame in HD shoots, I have noticed zero difference in both editing performance or color grading capabilities in my limited personal experiences using these two formats. So if you are shooting something in 1080 HD, you might as well save a whole lot of file space and shoot in long op. The 4K can only shoot at 410 megabits per second, so you're going to be eating up hard drive space like a wood chipper at a lumber yard. If we scale all this up to an hour of footage, the C100 will use about 9 gigabytes. The C300 HD long op will use about 20 gigabytes, HD intra-frame will use about 70 gigabytes, and the 4K will be 180 gigabytes. That's all for just 1 hour of footage, so you can see how this will really make a big difference quickly and why the C100 is still king here. A side note difference here, the C100 records to SD card while the C300 records to CFast cards. Yes, CFast cards are more expensive, but honestly, once you spend the money, you will forget about that. The practical issue I have found here is that my MacBook Pro has an SD card slot built into it, whereas I need a card reader for the CFast. Not a deal breaker, it's just one more piece of equipment that I need to buy, keep track of, and remember to pack on trips. Okay, enough about that, let's move on to image quality. What I'm in reference to here is the practical aspects of image quality that you're going to notice in the edit and the color grade, and your audience will notice just by watching your videos. Things like sharpness, dynamic range, range, colors, etc. Of course, because the C300 can shoot 4K and the C100 cannot, you can easily get a much sharper image out of the 300. Yes, both have a 4K sensor, but the output image from the C300 is far more sharp, even in 1080. It also tends to render skin tones better in color and in smoothness. It also has much better dynamic range than the C100, allowing me to recover blown out highlights easier than the 100 and performing much better in low light scenarios. Neither one is a great low light camera, but the C300 definitely takes the cake in low light. Finally, and most importantly, the 10-bit color of the C300 is far better than the 8-bit color out of the C100. There is much more latitude in color grades with the C-Log C gamut out of the 300. Now I will say I have noticed that in mixed lighting scenarios, the C100 tends to actually yield better color results. I'm not sure why this is, but the 300 really struggles to recover accurate and pleasing colors in a mixed lighting scenario. But if you can control the temperature of the lighting, the C300 is by far the way to go here. Sharpness, colors, and dynamic range really set the C300 apart as a professional image. For someone that knows how to properly expose, can create and control good lighting, and compose shots well, the C100 can still deliver rock-solid results. In fact, if you check out my video comparing these two cameras shot for shot, there are some scenarios in which one can hardly tell the difference between these two cameras at all. Even when there is a difference, it is negligible in most of these shots. My point is, yes, the C300 yields better results in a number of ways, but the C100 is no slouch here, and you really won't be disappointed with it as a professional cinema camera in the 2020s. I can't state enough how good of a camera and an image the C100 Mark II still yields by today's standards. Well, enough about that, let's move on to ND. Both cameras have internal ND, which is phenomenal. That said, the C100 Mark II only goes up to 6 stops of ND, while the C300 Mark II goes up to 10 stops of ND. There are plenty of times when I've shot outside with the C100 and completely lost my highlights, even when shooting at 6 stops of ND. The C300 allows me to go to 8 or 10 stops, which is nearly all I will ever need. Of course, there are scenarios when even more would be helpful, but this is a rarity. Now, I have found a good workaround for this with the C100. Adding a matte box with a 4-stop ND filter allows me to go up to 10 stops of ND when combined with the 6 stops of internal ND. And this gives me a range from 4 to 10 stops instead of 0 to 6 stops. When going inside, I can always slide the ND filter out, and I'm back to a 0 to 6 stop situation. This is a quick and effective solution to improve the image quality and has the bonus of making the camera look that much more professional. Well, while we're on that subject, let's go ahead and address the form factor, size, and weight of these two cameras. Now, this is a big toss-up. The C100 is much smaller and lighter for sure, which makes travel much easier and more possible. In fact, when I traveled to Europe this summer and wanted to only bring one checked bag, one carry-on, and one personal item, Europe's size and weight restrictions, which are much smaller than the US's, only made it possible for me to take the C100 given all of the other gear and personal items I needed to take. The C300 would have been far too heavy and bulky to take and stay within my limits. So too, the C100 is consequently easier to fly on a gimbal than the C300 and allows for more dynamic movements on a gimbal. You can check out the video that I did on that as well. On the flip side, the C300 has advantages of being bigger and heavier. Its handheld footage is far more usable than the C100 because it stabilizes better. Even when heel-toe walking, I haven't really been able to use the C100's footage handheld, but the C300 is often recoverable. There are far more buttons on the outside of the C300, making access to various setting changes a lot easier. It looks like a more professional camera, which can help when on set with a client, but that can also hurt when shooting in public and not wanting to draw attention, especially from official personnel. Moving on to the LCD screens. The C100 has a fully articulating LCD screen that is always attached to the camera. It can be seen from most angles you will find yourself in when operating. The C300, though, has a slightly bigger and more quality LCD screen. Now, there are a couple of versions out there, but I really like the one that I have. By attaching it to one of the many hot shoes on the top handle and then rotating and articulating it around, it can honestly be angled and seen from any vantage point around the camera. The downside of this is that it is not one with the camera body, and so it must be added to the body in some way, then plugged in using the cables that comes with it. This sucks because it means you always have setup time and additional bulk because you can't really operate the camera without it. The C100 will always have the screen, making life easy. The nice thing about the C300's monitor is it has a slew of controls and buttons as well to easily access menus and change important settings or record. Moving on to the top handles. Now I know most of you are probably thinking that I've gone way off track in terms of important specs between these two cameras, but honestly, the more I use both of them, the more the top handle feature has become a factor for me, and therefore I think it will be relevant for you too. The C300 has a far more robust and customizable top handle. There are 3 hot shoe mounts and 8 screw mounts to either move a piece like the LCD screen around to various positions or add several accessories all at once. The C100's top handle only has 1 hot shoe and 1 tripod thread on top. I've used this to add a cheese plate, but still it only has this one place for accessories. The nice thing about the C100's top handle though is that it is very easy to take on and off for packing the camera away in a hard case or for throwing it on a gimbal. The C300 requires an Allen wrench to add or remove the 2 screws that hold the top handle to the camera, making those scenarios inconvenient and more time consuming. So now the big question, who are these cameras for? If you shoot a lot of long form corporate content, be that conferences, talking head training videos, or even weddings, I would certainly recommend going with the C100 Mark II. You will thank your lucky stars for the drastically smaller file sizes, but you're still going to get all of the quality that you need for that professional look. If you shoot mostly documentaries, I would certainly recommend the C300 Mark II. It's a Netflix approved camera, which has kind of become the gold standard for online distribution specs, even if you aren't going to be making content for Netflix. It's just a standard that if you meet, you will basically meet every other online distribution platform standard. The C100 does not make the cut here, so you run the risk of not qualifying on some platforms. Now when it comes down to commercial client work for small to medium-sized businesses, be that promo videos, social media ads, etc., like what I find myself doing most of the time, I really can't say which is the better camera to go with. Wherever one camera has a deficiency, the other camera really meets that need. But then, it falls way short in another area that the former camera excels in. Literally, folks, I'm at a complete toss-up for myself of which of these two cameras to hold on to because it's such a seesaw here in pros and cons. I will say in terms of price that the C300 costs on average about twice as much as the C100 when buying used on eBay, of which you can find affiliate links in the description below for both of those cameras, so if it's truly a matter of money, then the C100 is the clear winner. But beyond that, I'm truly at a loss. I personally can't decide. This is sad. Hopefully though for you, this video has helped one stand out over the other. If you do need a little more to work with, I have a few clips linked in the description below that you can download and play with yourself. So that's it for this one. Though I won't be able to see you in the next video, you're gonna be able to see me. Rough.